Hey guys, this is Jason, Colorado Mountain Man Survival. I'm out at camp today with Matt. He's going to show you how to load a brass snare wire. We're going to use 20 gauge snare wire. Stick with us and we'll show you how to do it.
How's it going, everybody? So we figured we'd come out here and do something a little bit more realistic instead of trying to do a video in town. But there's not as many animals moving around as I thought there would be. So we're still going to have to kind of simulate a little bit. But this appears to be possibly a small animal of some kind. Probably more than likely a type of squirrel or a chipmunk. A bit small for rabbit. But there was a bit of activity around it. There's a little bit of an opening here. So one of the biggest things and the biggest key to success when it comes to trapping is understanding how animals behave. You're trying to manipulate that animal into behaving the way you want it to behave without spooking the animal. So you want to try to understand, where does the animal live, signs of habitation. You need to understand how the animals move, what their environment is, what the animal is likely to do based on its search for territory, for a mate, for food sources, stay away from predators and that kind of stuff. So there's definitely animal sign in the area, which is obviously a plus when you're going to be trying to trap one. Animals tend to like to take the path of least resistance. So, there's a fair bit of scrub and brush and everything else. Path of least resistance, it looked like something has kind of been coming through here, at least in the past. Through here or through here would be your path of least resistance. So if you're for sure that an animal lives in something like this, you could actually set multiple snares in the same spot. Set one or two over there, set one here, and kind of block off and really isolate the number of paths. Traps is a number game too. I mean, traps aren't necessarily 100%. So if you set out 5 traps, what's your chance of success versus setting out 10 traps, 15 traps, 20 traps? The more you set out, you're drastically increasing your chance of survival. But for now, we're only going to do 1 or 2, and we'll kind of show you how that goes. This brass wire we're using, this is either 20 or 22 gauge, I can't remember. This is probably a bit thick for your smaller pine squirrel, but it's better than nothing. So I would definitely, for survival situations, I would probably only worry about bringing wire for small game. I wouldn't necessarily be worrying about trying to bring like cable snares and stuff capable of handling raccoons and larger. That's a lot of weight. There's not anything very substantial for me to really tie off to. Last thing I want to do is actually catch an animal and then have them just pull the whole trap set up and take off with it. Because there's not really much that's super sturdy to tie off to. I went ahead and just found a stick. I put a little rudimentary point on there. I'm going to anchor that down because whatever this is, it's rabbit sized or smaller. So now I actually grabbed another stick to beat it in, but this is very soft, kind of mossy ground, so I might not actually even need to use the stick until I get down there a ways. But I mean, that's pretty sturdy. I can give it a couple of whacks to get it in there. Yeah, so no rabbit is going to pull that out of the ground or pull it over. That's pretty sturdy. Also, too, I would say that as long as you've got an easy way to cut the wire, Multitool is very handy for a lot of things, including that, a way to cut the wire. You're probably better off leaving the wire in one piece instead of trying to pre-make the snares at home, because you don't know necessarily, how far away am I going to have to try to stake this down. Do I need to try to tie a piece of natural cordage or paracord to it to act as a swivel to also get me over closer to where I'm trying to set the trap? So it might be better for you to actually wait until you're ready to build the trap to do so. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. So I'm going to add allowance for making my eyelet. If you're doing rabbit, you only want about a 4 to 5 inch hole. Obviously squirrel are going to be smaller. And again, that takes a bit of knowledge on your part. How big is the animal I'm going for? How small of a hole are they willing to stick their head or their body part into? If it's too big, are they just going to go right through it without setting it off? But so rabbit, like cottontails anyways, they're usually about 4 to 5 inches, give or take. Squirrel, I would probably, for red squirrel, I'd say maybe 2 to 3 inches. And that even might be a little bit big. You can kind of tweak that as you get the hang of stuff though. So that's going to be plenty of material for that. And then you want enough material to be able to wrap around directly your stake and tie down. And then also too, if you can do multiple wraps around this with the wire, you can kind of create a bit of an arm to really kind of adjust this. That's one of the advantages of wire, is it's got that memory versus cable. Unless you're going with a really, really thick cable, or not thick cable, a stiff cable, Cable tends to be more noodly, more like a string or a rope. So it doesn't necessarily want to stay in the shape that you pick. Now we're going to go ahead and make the eyelet. I'll show you guys how to make a locking eyelet. Snare locks and locking snares are mainly to keep the animal from getting out. So if this thing is just a passive snare on the ground and the animal comes through and they start to pull on it, starts to choke them out, you're hoping the animal will panic and choke itself out. However, some animals are smarter than that. They may stop and say, what is this thing around me? What is this? And they may stop pulling, and once they stop pulling and if they relax a bit, that may allow your snare, whether it's cordage or anything else, to open up, and they may be able to then get like a paw through, get it off their head, that kind of a deal. So if you have something that locks down, it's more of a one-way. Depending on the gauge of your wire, the locking snare may not work all that well. The wire itself, the material, its thickness, its hardness, its ductility may kind of interfere, and that secondary loop may not choke down all the way. But I don't know of a trap failing because it had a locker versus being free sliding. When I say that, I'm probably not phrasing that quite right. Adding a locker to the snare is probably a better idea than not. It's not going to hurt anything. I don't see how it's going to stop the trap from working. It may not cinch down and make it a locking snare, depending on how you've designed it, but it's probably not going to hurt anything. And instead of just having one piece of wire on one piece of wire as a pinch point, if you double that up when you make the locking eyelets, that then doubles the surface area that you're dealing with on the eyelet side. So what you can do is you can either wrap the wire around a stick and then break the stick out if you're kind of a OCD and you want the eyelets to be small and pre-sized. Or you can also just take and bend over like so and make it a large eyelet if you want to just fold it over like the figure 8, which I'll show you here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a little bit more just to be on the safe side. And I can always trim that tail off since I do have my wire nippers. But all I'm going to do is, I've just put that, overlapped it. I'm just going to twist that. And I'm twisting the wire together. And I'm trying to get the wires to twist evenly around each other. I don't necessarily want one barber poling around the other. Same thing with like you're doing natural cordage. So that should distribute load evenly across both legs of the wire. What some people do, I don't know that it necessarily hurts either, is you can actually leave that tail on, and instead of having it bent down in line with everything, you can actually add that as a function of your trap. All right, so as I was saying, you can actually incorporate that tail into your trap design, and as far as I know, it doesn't hurt anything. So essentially, when we finish making this eyelet, you're going to turn that tail inwards onto the snare, and so as that chokes down around the animal, this is actually then going to start poking into their neck, and which will hopefully cause them to panic more, which will then cause them to struggle more, which will then cause it to be more quick acting, fast acting. Now that I've got that very, very, very large eyelet, what I can do, again, like I said, a stick may make it easier. You're actually going to pinch this in half and put a twist in it. So keeping in mind which way I've twisted it, I don't necessarily want to untwist it. I'm going to keep a hold of my base. I'm going to put the stick in there. I've actually lengthened that because I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to turn it. I'm going to try to put that twist right in the middle and have 2 eyelets. So I'm going to pinch, or you could also not be a dummy and use your pliers if you have them. That helps. Put my stick through there. I'm actually going to move that up. So what I'm going to do is just put one little twist in there, like so. And like I said, you can either then break that stick out if you can't pull it out, or just pull it out. So kind of crude, but as you can see, I've now made that overlap itself. And then you're going to fold that in half over. So you made like kind of a figure 8, and now I'm going to fold it over again and have both the holes lined up, but still leaving that loop in there. So as I said, now I've doubled my surface area of where these 2 wires are going to interact against one another. I've doubled that eyelet over. And so as I was saying, or as I was trying to say, that has now doubled the surface area of where these 2 wires are going to be working against one another. Because when this activates, you're going to have wire against wire with a struggling animal on the end. You've now doubled that surface area, so that's much less likely for your eyelet to break. And hopefully, as the animal struggles, it'll cinch that down and cause the snare wire to lock up. So then the snare wire can only get smaller, not bigger or smaller. So now before we get too far on this, this is not too bad. The wire, when I had it stowed, it was still fairly nice and round. However, when you're pulling this thing out, your wire, whether you're reusing a snare or however you had it packed in there, it may have had all kinds of different stuff done to it. I mean, it forms in memory, it moves around and all that. You could have this, I'll even be a little bit more extreme. I got to try to make a snare out of that. So carefully try to take and undo if you have a tangle. So you can see how janky that is. We need to fix that, because even if I sit here for 10, 15 minutes trying to straighten this wire out, make it nice and smooth, because the smoother a snare is, the better. You really want the only action it does to be to close. You don't want it catching on things and everything else. But so even me trying to straighten that out, you can see all those little kinks and wobbles and things in it. Ideally, you want to get rid of those. We'll go ahead and use this guy, get this down on the ground. I'm going to take and just put my wire, and it doesn't even have to be a big stick. It can be a small stick. It can still be on the tree, like I said, but you're going to be straightening your wire. And it's something that I need to work on. Sometimes I'll get kind of cockeyed, where I'll be pulling the wire like this, and I'm still going to end up creating a spiral. You want everything to be in line. Hey, stop. You want everything in line while you're doing this. Otherwise, your wire is going to develop a memory, kind of more like a spring in one of those directions. You want everything in line where I'm doing this, and I'm not even going to necessarily pull super hard, but I'm just going to work that wire, if I can hang on to it. I'm going to work that wire across that bark in a straight line. And it didn't even have to be like a 90. It can be a wider angle if you want. But just running that wire like that, it is going to form a memory, but see how it's in line? It's not off to one side or the other, which may make the wire more difficult to deal with. But look how smooth that is. I got rid of all those kinks and knots and stuff just by forming that wire out like that. So all I'm going to do is run the tail end of the wire through that double locking eyelet that I made, like so. I'll do some of the sizing beforehand. This really only works on like some of your somewhat thicker stuff. Like I said, this is about 20 or 22 gauge brass. I think going down a size from this makes it a lot harder, because at a certain point the wire just becomes a little too flimsy. Any memory that it forms might not be all that great. But so essentially what I've done is I've got it run through. Everything's in a nice line. Everything's nice and smooth. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start shrinking that wire. I'm going to be controlling that memory. And where it's been doubled up, obviously it's going to be more resistant, so I'll kind of just bend that a little bit. You don't want to put sharp kinks anywhere in it, but I'm going to size this down and give it a memory to where the memory is in the closed position, or closer to the closed position, instead of being in the open position. What we're doing is we're going to try to set the snare and use that memory to our advantage. So I'm going to size this open to about yay big. Ideally, what will happen is the animal will come along, and I've kind of spring-loaded this snare to where they're going to come along, and any kind of real movement or anything they do to that, it's going to try to shoot this down. I probably tweaked my wire here a little too much. That surface area needs to be a little bit more free-moving. A little bit more, sorry. See how the wire wants to snap open? Ideally, I want that going in the opposite direction. So shrink it small. And when you enlarge it bigger, now it wants to go back to being small. And it's not much. I mean, the thing's not going to close on its own. But the idea is, like I said, so an animal comes along, and if they just barely even hit it, see how much it shrank down, and that's less pulling the animal has to do. Because, I mean, once you get to a certain point, the animal then has to pull against your trap, and that's resistance. And like I said, a lot of animals, they're not little bulldozers. Something catches, and if it's providing too much resistance, they may kind of stop and go, what am I stuck on? What is this thing? And that may cause them to stop and try to get out of it, which you don't want. So anything that'll help you close that distance, close the distance and begin to put the animal down the faster the better. But so we'll go ahead and just open this back up to about the right size. Take. Okay, I'm going to go around my stake. So I'm just going to say we'll just set this for rabbit, since I am a bit more familiar with that. If I was going to go for red squirrel and stuff here, I'd probably actually go for a squirrel pole. That's one of the better ways to do it. So I'm going to go around my stick probably at least 3 times or 4 times, just for safety's sake. Wire, can break. But like I said, that'll also give you a bit of a stiffer arm here to be able to adjust this trap. Because if I have just one eyelet of brass wire, I mean, that's a pretty thin pivot point, and that's going to kind of want to move around on you. So if I can wrap it around 2 times or 3 times or 4 times, that'll give me a much sturdier base. And pull the slack out. And then give this a couple of twists. Kind of mangling all that work I did to the trap earlier, but practice makes perfect. Ooh, come on now. It's all right. If I can get at least started once. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to wrap that wire at least 3 times or 4 times. Again, you don't want a small animal pulling out. And, that is kind of a reality of trapping, is that you may get robbed. You may have done everything right and caught the animal you were targeting, but if a fox or a coyote or something comes along, and they just go, oh, look at that, delivery. So they may actually just take the whole set, or they'll just eat the animal out of the trap right there. So, all right. Now I'm turning that little barb that I had, turning that more inwards again. So like I said, when the animal hits that, and that starts kind of digging into their neck, they may hopefully think that maybe they're being attacked or something's kind of going wrong, which may make them struggle more, which will then help them choke out faster. Now I'm actually a bit low for cottontail. You want to be about 4 to 5 inches around, about 3 inches off the ground. That's not too bad. So that's about sized right. It's got a little bit of a set to it. It's being a little difficult. Try to set it a bit better. And reopen. Okay. Everything's pretty well in line. There we go. Alrighty, so now that's pretty well blocked just with natural material. You don't necessarily want to build a wall, because that may be suspicious and out of place, and that may spook the animal and not want them to go anywhere near. You want it to be more natural if possible. But so essentially I'm going to kind of just block off the edges a bit. And for edges, I like to at least go to the wire, and you could actually go over the wire a little bit. But again, you want that to be the best area for them to stick their head. So you don't want it to be too closed off. And this doesn't even have to be anything, you're not have to be load bearing. Just enough to where they kind of look at something and go, that looks a little too difficult to go that way. A little too difficult to go that way. That looks pretty easy. I'll go through there. So we'll kind of just some little twigs. You can use grass, bigger stuff, small stuff, kind of just all depending on your personal preference and your style as you start to get a feel for things. And another thing you can add as well, that a lot of folks do, is, again, like I said, animals, they're down here, these small critters. They got their face is what they lead with. And their nose is sensitive, their eyes are sensitive. Like I said, they're not gonna, unless they have to, they're not gonna go crashing through thick brush. And a lot of times too, they may see something like this and kind of go, I want to go under that. So what you can do to hopefully try to prevent it is get a stick. Doesn't have to be anything huge. It can be small, it can be a piece of grass again. But you can actually take and just put one little twig or something right kind of in the middle there, and that's the chin lifter. So instead of the animal coming up and kind of going, well, that looks, I'm going to work and go under, and they kind of go, well, I'm just going to get my nose up over that. And so you're just trying to get them to lift their head or their chin up a little bit to where they put it through there, and then as they're going, that'll hopefully close off on them. Animal comes through, that's got a bit of a set to it. So they come through, they trip it. They'll have hopefully just their head through. You ideally want to go for a neck catch, because any other body part they can possibly chew off or chew the wire or the string. But so like I said, the idea is they hit this, they kind of start to go, oh shit, I don't like that. I don't like that. Oh. And then as they struggle around their neck, ideally that wire is going to pinch down Alrighty, so that's just a rudimentary, you know, down and dirty how to load a snare, how to set a small snare. Just like with many things, I mean, you know, we're just scratching the surface. There's so many different types of snares, whether they're powered, unpowered, trigger systems, deadfalls, snares, body grips. I mean, you can do all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's really, really a fun hobby, and it's a good skill to have. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.